God, it's so loud! If only it could be quiet. Like this. Part of today's video is sponsored by Alza, Czech Republic. Playing with the electronics of your 3D printer will void its warranty and may damage the printer permanently. Everything you do at your own risk. Were you ever printing something really important, but someone of your roommates or even your neighbors didn't like that? I'm sure yes. I can't imagine what was going through your mind. How do I make sure I can print without making a noise? Not this one. A box from Clarity and a word silent on it. It is possible that it is a silent motherboard? Really? It really is? It's even a direct replacement for the original one, which means you just have to swap the new one with the old one, as in a case of any other motherboard ready for this 3D printer. Before we begin, turn off the printer and disconnect it from the power source. In this video, we will start with the Ender-3 3D printer, but finish the motherboard replacement on the Ender-3 Pro. With the Ender-3, access to the motherboard is much easier than with the Ender-3 Pro. Just move the bed away and remove these 3 screws. After removing these 2 screws, move the bed in front. This gives us access to the last third screw. Then remove the cover and carefully disconnect the fan cable from the motherboard. Then eject the card and voila! The motherboard is ready for disassembly and all the fun around. If you do not want to squeeze in such a small space, you can disassemble the entire box with electronics and thus gain more freedom of movement. To do this, you need to unscrew these 2 screws. Then, turn the printer on its side and unscrew this screw and carefully remove the entire electronics box. We now have much better access to the entire motherboard. Before we continue with Ender-3 Pro, I would like to thank everyone who contributed to the existence of this YouTube channel and support me in what I do. We will now continue with the Ender-3 Pro. To open the electronics box, you need to loosen this screw on the top of the box. Then place the printer on its side and loosen these 3 screws. After that, we can remove the cover of the electronics box and possibly disconnect the fan from the board. If your memory card is still in the printer, please remove it. This motherboard is fixed with 4 screws that need to be unscrewed. After unscrewing them, carefully remove the motherboard. The motherboard we will install is actually identical to the one we already have. As a bonus, this board contains TMC2208 stepper drivers which, thanks to a larger number of microsteps, reduce the vibrations of the motors and reduce the noise they make due to the vibrations. The connectors are secured with glue, and this glue needs to be removed to release them. I know that this glue is not very good to see in the video, but a bit of movie magic and now it should be better. The glue can be removed, for an example, using pliers or similar tools. Do everything very carefully not to damage the motherboard or any of the wires. Now, there is nothing to stop us from moving all the cables from one board to another. First, we move the cables controlling the motors of the individual axes. Then, the display cable, the cables of the thermistors and stops, the cables that control the heating of the printer, and finally the cables that are used to supply the power. So let's start with the X-axis. Continue with the Y-axis. Then the Z-axis. And finally the E-axis, which you know as an extruder. If you have not already done so, please disconnect the fan attached to the cover of the electronics box from the motherboard. This will make it much easier for you to handle both motherboards. Now, reconnect this large connector that leads to the display of your 3D printer. Then carefully place the new motherboard on the original one and continue reconnecting the connectors. Now, reconnect the hot end thermistor. Then, the print bed thermistor. And we will slowly start switching end stops. The first one is the Z end stop. The next one is the Y end stop. And the last end stop is X end stop. The very last is the fan cable that cools the model you are printing. This cable needs to be connected to the connector labeled as fan 1. Congratulations! The easier half is behind you and you can continue with the more difficult part. If your cables are secured with a cable tie, remove it. This will make it much easier for you to work with individual wires. Now, use a flathead screwdriver to loosen and disconnect the first wire, which will be the negative contact of the hot end heating cartridge. Disconnect this wire, loosen the contact in the same position on the new board, and insert and screw the wire here. If you can't insert the wire into the connector, try straightening the wires of that wire. And continue in the same way with the second, positive contact of the hot end heating cartridge. Be careful not to touch the wires anywhere. Now, disconnect this black wire which leads to the negative contact of the heated print bed and immediately screw it to the new motherboard. We will do the same with this red wire, which leads to positive contact of the heated print bed. And we will continue with these thin wires that lead to the fan that cools our heatsink on the hot end. The black wire is a negative contact, and this red is a positive contact. Make sure all wires are in place. Lastly, we have wires going from the power supply, which we can disconnect at once. Thanks to it, we will be able to remove the original motherboard, and this will make it easier for us to finish the wiring. The red wire belongs to the left hole. The black wire belongs to the right hole. Attach both wires firmly. Done! Now you can connect the fan to the motherboard and test that everything works and no magic smoke appears anywhere. If everything is okay, you can install the motherboard in the printer and assemble the entire printer. Congratulations, done, bye. Or not? This new motherboard is designed almost identically to the original motherboard. Unfortunately, it has also one, let's call it imperfection, like the original board had. The fact is that the connectors for fan and fan 1 are connected together. The connector labeled fan is used to cool the stepper motor drivers on the motherboard. The connector labeled fan 1 is used to cool the print. In short, it means that until we start blowing air to our print, we are not cooling our motherboard at all. This can be a problem during printing, for an example from ABS, because with ABS you don't want to cool down the print at all. It can easily happen the stepper motor drivers overheat and the printer starts to do some strange movements and so on. Only the original motherboard and the original silent motherboard have this imperfection. Motherboards from other manufacturers have different wiring and the correct connection must be verified for each board individually. If you have turned it off the fan only for the first layer and then always use the fan, theoretically you don't have to change anything. However, if you want to make sure that nothing happens to the motherboard, it is better to change wiring of the fan so it runs all the time. One option is to remove the connector from the original fan cable, remove the insulation from the wires, and connect the wires together with the wires of the fan that cool the heatsink on the hot end. If you don't want to destroy the original cable, you can use, for example, wires with the DuPont connectors, which you insert into the original connector and secure them with some adhesive tape. Now, remove the insulation of these wires and, as before, connect them together with the wires of the fan that cool the heatsink on the hot end. If you like to do things properly, you can end the cables with the wire terminals. When you have everything done and connected, just carefully place the board back in the box and screw it on. Finally, connect the fan connector to the motherboard, if you haven't already done so, and screw the entire cover back into the place. Put the printer back in the standby position and screw in the last screw holding the cover of the electronics box. Then, connect the printer to the electricity and turn the printer on. If you did everything right, the printer should start working as it did before this whole process. I'm sure you are all interested in how big is the difference in the noise level of your 3D printer before and after replacing the motherboard. Here you can see a small demonstration. Since this board reduces motor vibrations and not fan noise, I turn it off all fans because they have not changed and they are hell noisy. Here is an example of homing with the original motherboard. Here is an example of homing with the silent motherboard. Boom! What do you think? Is there some difference? The loudest was probably the bump to the end stop. I'm sure you are also wondering if the print quality has changed. Thanks to better stepper motor drivers and interpolation from 16 microsteps to 256, the movement is smoother and significantly less choppy. Unfortunately, even the best motherboard will not help with the poor adhesion of the print bed. So again and properly. Same printer, same G-code, same filament, different motherboard. At first glance, the prints are very similar. The vertical lines are visibly softer on the print on the right side than on the print on the left side. This is because of lower vibrations, which result from a higher number of microsteps, thanks to which the movement is significantly smoother. However, one more error can be seen on the print printed on the original board. Unfortunately, it is not visible on the camera. Maybe if we shine another sort of light on it. Ah, damn! Never mind. Maybe it will be seen, at least a little. Do you see the diagonal stripes there? No? Okay, so wait a few minutes, I will print it out of another filament. Hopefully it will be better now. For example, if I tilt it like this, maybe it will be too seen. Yes? Do you all see? Really, everyone? Great! This is a side effect of the cheap stepper motor drivers on the original motherboard. You will no longer find these artifacts on the print that was printed after the motherboard was replaced. Well, that's actually the end of this video. What to say in conclusion? Take everything in this video just as an example of how I would do it. Some things might have been done better. For example, when connecting cables from the old board to the new board, we could use wire terminals on all wires that do not have connectors. Or I could show the difference in the temperatures of the stepper motor drivers during printing. But for many people, this information is not interesting, so I didn't put it in the video.